The next question is going to be regarding tax abatements. We'll give a little bit of background, and this is a question that has multiple parts, so each candidate will have a slightly different question to answer. Candidate Connolly, you'll be the first to answer the question.
Thank you.
Under the long-term tax abatement statute, the municipality, Jersey City, is required to remit 5% of the pilot payments in lieu of taxes, to the county. However, the statute doesn't provide for the municipality to remit any payments to the Board of Education. This results in an unbalanced tax structure, very different than the normal tax structure and the distribution of those taxes. This is the first question. What plan do you have to make the tax burden and the benefits with respect to tax abatements more equitable across the entire city?
Very simple. Very simple. Every tax abated property pays a certain amount of money to the city and does not pay the lion's share of the county taxes, and they pay none of the school taxes. And who makes up that difference? That tax bill doesn't go down. They have to spread that tax bill amongst the rest of us who are not tax abated. Now, we often hear this claim that the waterfront has among the highest incomes in our country. That may be true, I don't know. Well, then what the heck are we subsidizing the wealthiest people in this city for? That is so unfair, I can't believe there aren't people getting as angry as I am about it.
We are.
So long as we have these tax abatements, they're removing tax ratables from the pool. The city still has its bills, and they have to get that smaller pool. Everyone in that pool gets a larger cut to have to pay into, and it's just not fair. In addition, I honestly don't see that the abatements have done any good for our city. In the last 10 years, despite the brag of the $110 million that the abatements have brought in, mind you, if they weren't abated, that would be $200 million. Our city budget, despite all that, has gone up about 200 to 300%. At a time when we only had inflation of 1.5%. So I applaud new businesses coming into our city. I applaud people getting jobs in those new businesses. But when it means that we have to shoulder the burden, their tax burden, that we've been paying and slaving for, and many of us are fearful of our retirements that we simply will not be able to pay our taxes, I would have to say, until we can change the rules here, no abatement goes out until they pay. And put it this way, we should not be permitted to abate their school tax or the county tax. That should be off the table. And that's my ruling. I'm not going to change on that.
The next question will be for candidate Regalado. If presented with an application for a long-term tax abatement, what specific factors will you consider when deciding how to vote?
First of all, if I am presented with a tax abatement, it's pretty simple. I'm totally against tax abatements. I don't see why when we have some of the best land in the country, we have the waterfront, why should we give somebody a tax abatement to move here? Everybody wants it. You know, we should actually give it to the highest bidder. We should go around and find out who wants to pay more for this land and get more money and get more taxes for this precious land that everybody wants. You have people from all over the world wanting a piece of the New York skyline. You know, they want to be able to look at New York. And we have this land. So why should we consider giving somebody a tax abatement to move to some of the best land in Jersey City? Another thing is, if we have these tax abatements already, which we do, you know, we have the Newport, people who build Newport, in fact, 40 years. They don't pay taxes for 40 years. They can't go anywhere else. They have no more land to build on. Why are we considering giving anybody else, you know, a big abatement like this when there's no more land for somebody like Newport to build? Now they have another 20 years left on their contract, which they're not paying taxes and they're not building. So that all falls on us. We have to hold them accountable. We have to say no, and we have to hold the people who are abated, we have to hold them accountable. If they say if they say they're gonna hire 49% of Jersey City residents in their firms, then we should make sure that we have the proper people looking at them and checking up on them and making sure that 49% of our residents are working there.
Candidate Perez, the next question is for you. Currently, over 30% of properties in Jersey City have some sort of tax abatement. If presented with an application for an extension of a current tax abatement, what specific factors would you consider when deciding how to vote?
I think that the purpose of tax abatements, as they were back 20, 30 years ago, were to encourage development in a time where development wasn't taking place. Once you've received an abatement, I personally am not in favor of extending abatements. I think the language would have to be changed if we were looking at it. But honestly, I think that, you know, at that point in time, I think that those properties were given the opportunity to start building, to start getting residents into selling those condominiums. I think that we are looking at abatements. We're looking at abatements for properties off the Gold Coast, off the waterfront. We're looking at how we can improve development up here in the Heights, how we can start moving development and not low-income housing, but mixed-use housing. But let's start developing areas of McKinley Square, start developing areas in the Bergen Lafayette areas. I think we start looking for ways for our city to actually start growing more outside of the Gold Coast, the waterfront area. So I think that those are some things I want to look at. I think some of the language needs to be changed so we can alleviate the burden on education. Education is by far the largest chunk. Why property taxes? Why the state of New Jersey property taxes is huge because, and it's so overburdening because a large part of that funds the educational system. So we need to make sure that when we go and look at some of these abatements, we start looking at some of the past abatements and reworking the language there so we can start getting some of those revenues back into the school system.
Why aren't we doing that now?
We need to shorten that. I'm not on the council now, so as soon as you can, vote me in and I'll start working on that. We can start looking at enforcement. We can start looking at the enforcement of the project labor agreements, like my colleague said. You know, there's any type of work that's been tied there. You know, one of the worst things is that abatements that were given out in the past had this like threshold that they had to meet before they started going into project labor agreements. Let's start lowering that threshold on some of the current abatements so that we can make sure Jersey City residents are being put to work and we start developing our community.
Candidate Rivera, the next question is for you. If you did have to pick one area of Jersey City to use tax abatements to promote developer tax abatements, where would it be and why?
Well, just to downtown needs to be no more tax abatement down there. It's like ridiculous that area down there. And I would definitely pick Journal Square or areas up in the Heights where we could use some of that tax abatement money, some of that percentage to go into our public schools so that we can have programs, you know, for our youth that we're really losing in crimes. And, you know, 30-year tax, sometimes I hear 30-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year tax abatements. We definitely need to stop doing that immediately. But I think abatements, bringing a percentage of that abatement into the schools is key, and it'll work for the city better.
Thank you. And Waterman, the next question is for you. What is your position on tax abatements? Are you for them, against them, and why?
First of all, my position on tax abatements is I am for them in the right community. Okay? Because as you look over the city, there are certain areas in the city that do need help. And what a tax abatement does, it kind of jumpstart the community. You know, you encourage developers to come to invest in that community. And when they come invest in that community, it brings the community alive. So in certain areas, I think a tax abatement really is a good thing. But the problem is that the negotiation piece. See, I'm a firm believer of this. If you want something from me, I want something from you. So then we got to sit down and negotiate. And when we negotiate, we make sure that the residents of Jersey City are really taken care of. I think that's what happened in the previous tax abatements. They forgot the city, they forgot the people. So what we need to do, we need to go back at the table, because tax abatements is really not a bad thing, because it does help our community, and some of our communities do need help. And we need to give the developers the incentive to come to our communities to help jumpstart it. So I am for it in the right community. Thank you.
Candidate Navarro, speaking of residents, new residents to our city often buy 100-year-old homes and renovate them for the future. Although residents purchasing such homes are not considered developers under the statute, certainly these kind of projects appear to be an investment in our city. Should these types of investments receive tax abatements? Why or why not?
You're speaking of historical properties, essentially.
Yeah. When residents buy homes and renovate them, should that kind of a project receive a tax abatement?
You're talking about 100-year-old homes. So,
yes.
So we're talking about historic properties in that sense, and you know, there's a large burden to renovate historic properties. Huge costs are involved in that.
I think almost every house here is about 100 years old, so it's not historic.
Okay.
Please hold your comments till later. We'll add that time on.
So maybe I misunderstood the question. Are we talking about historic districts or just any home that's...
Not talking about historical property as defined, but the idea that when residents come in here and buy a home and spend the money to renovate, should they receive a tax abatement for the idea that they're making a financial investment in the community, the same way that a developer who arrives into our city makes a financial investment and their reward is a tax abatement?
That's a very good question. I haven't really thought through that situation. Listen, you know, our basic premise on the idea of tax abatements, and the basic premise that I approach tax abatements is the idea of incentivizing development. So I'll kind of talk this through right now with you, and the idea that if you have a 100-year-old home and someone's making an investment in Jersey City, you know, for anyone is entitled to essentially a tax abatement, a 5-year tax abatement, when they do certain renovations to their property or their home. Whether they new purchase or not, if it's your old purchase, if you reach a certain threshold on the renovation dollar amount, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's $5,000, you're entitled to a 5-year tax abatement. That's by law. So a property that somebody purchases is 100 years old, if they're going to have significant renovations, by law, they're entitled to a tax abatement in that regard. I just want to kind of speak to the idea of generally that you know, tax abatements generally, you want to use them, particularly when you talk about long-term, for stimulating investment in areas that are in need of investment, as my colleague Joyce Waterman said. And you know, if we can target those incentives and use those incentives to encourage development in particular areas that are in need of it, I will support that, but with certain conditions. That's what I'll end that.
Thank you.